Everton up to second in the Premier League, 4 wins in a row domestically. What a horrible game when Everton got there in the end. They are 2 points off the top of the league on Boxing Day. It's remarkable, isn't it? Joining me now to have a chat about all that is Rob Vera, Dave Downey, Mark Mosey. Dave, we were saying before we came on there, I think a combination of the Christmas festivities and shouting at that match that your voice has got a little bit.
Most of it's due to most of it's
when
due
you said
to,
I didn't realise.
it's like you expected me to have a completely different voice when I speak. I mean, all of it, like in the last half an hour, is because of that game, which was infuriating at times. A lot of it not through the fault of Everton, really. I thought we had to. This sounds quite bad for the opposition, but we had to stoop to Sheffield United's level. It's completely different voice to ultimately get a result tonight. And then what a lovely goal. The goal is so surprising because of the temperament that all the players seem to show throughout the move. You look at when Bernard gets it, the lovely cushion pass into Decore and his sort of wherewithal and vision to do that at such a time in the game where you're expecting him to try and turn or pivot or shoot. And it's just a beautiful moment. It's such a well-worked goal. And effectively, that bit of quality is the difference between these two sides. And what a massive win that is. That is huge. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I was pretty downbeat after the performance in the Carabao Cup quarter-final. I thought Everton bottled it a little bit, but I know we don't want to get into the finer details of that. There's a podcast on that if people want to listen to it. But tonight was never going to be pretty at all. I looked out of my curtain before, and that weather outside, there's a storm hitting the country. And his name's Bernard.
Right, yeah, get it now. But yeah, and I think Mose, it was one of them where, before the game, you said, "What was that? What's this football match going to be like?" I probably would have said exactly what it was like, and I've really felt as though Everton were in danger of conceding in that game. It was always just going to be about whether the players we had on the pitch and the way in which we were playing and the pattern of the game meant that they could find a way through and get the decisive goal. And like Dave said, they managed to just, so out of line with the rest of the football match, wasn't it? But they were able to just conjure that one moment of quality in the second half. Second half, they got them over the line.
That game was never and could never be any different to what it was. If Everton were going to win the game, that was how it was going to be. 1-0, horrible, one of the worst Premier League football matches of its entire history. But they are the sorts of games where historically, obviously, Everton don't win those. In particular, as Dave referenced, on the back of what was an understandable, I think, but an equally disappointing defeat in midweek. I think the overshadowing reference you could bring out of that game against Manchester United was that it looked as though football matches were just coming at Everton too thick and too fast at the moment. The last thing you need on the back of a comment like that is a game 3 days later in a storm when your arguably 4 best players aren't playing. It's got all the hallmarks of Evertonian disappointment. But I think as much as we say that we kind of knew the path of the game and we knew the style of victory that we were aiming for, I think Dave referenced the temperament, and I think that was really important. I think any football team, but in particular Everton teams down the years, there's an opportunity for panic in the last 25 minutes whereby, your routine victory is clearly not there. It is going to have to be really hard fought, and you're going to have to dig in. You're going to get one chance, and you're going to have to take it. But I think I never really failed to feel that assurance. I felt as though if we got a chance, we'd take it. I felt as though if we got our noses ahead, we'd be comfortable. I appreciate that the opposition are part of that confidence, but we have a back line now that, regardless of who plays in it, and albeit that the 4 lads who started tonight, I think, look the most comfortable in this system. But there is a confidence about Everton not conceding goals. if we were to go back 5 or 6 weeks when we were longing to remember what the last clean sheet was, which was back on the opening day at Spurs, you could never have imagined talking about this team in the way we are in terms of defensive solidity.
3 clean sheets and 4 in the league now, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, the stat that keeps coming up about not even conceding shots on target. I mean, what is this football team? How have we become this sort of Ancelotti-inspired, Milan-esque stalwart defence at the back? It's incredible. But I think in the eternal words of Metallica, nothing else matters other than that result tonight.
There we go. I didn't think we'd be getting a Metallica reference on the show tonight, to be fair. Yeah, speaking of heavy metal, let's go to Rob Vera. Robin, I think it's the thing that I'm sort of so happy about sitting here now, and the thing that I was concerned about before the game was that there were so many opportunities and so many traps, I think, for Everton to Everton this up today. You know, we were a team that hadn't won this season. We had a lot of players out. We had a lad out who we've not won without in the Premier League before. All of our rivals in and around the table dropped points today. It felt like there was an opportunity for us, and in the past when we've got into these positions, we've somehow managed to mess it up, be it a draw or be it a defeat. But they didn't Everton it, and I think that's probably the biggest compliment we can pay them.
Yeah, all the old Everton excuses that have become oddly comfortable for this club, too comfortable over the last, I'd say, decade or so. They were all there. I used to joke that we were the kind of team that were front runners because, as long as we had all of our available players and as long as the wind was not blowing too hard, it wasn't too rainy, wasn't too cold, things go pretty well for us. We've been waiting. I don't know. I feel like I've been waiting for half my life now, but we've been waiting for a side that could find ways, despite all the old reasons, to win games like this. This is the kind of game that, and I don't have the historical record in front of me, but doesn't this feel like the kind of game that we've typically drawn or lost in a fluke circumstance before so many times? I think that's what was so nice about this was I think I said in our chat, Matt, I'll take the 3 points and I don't care what it looks like, and I don't really care what happens against City as long as we can get these 3 points. I meant that. I'm going to try to remind myself of that in a couple of days, even though now I'm up for anything at this point. But Mark said it. I think Mark said it really well. You suddenly have a side that is oozing confidence defensively. 3 out of 4 are clean sheets, but we haven't allowed a goal from open play in 4 games either. Arsenal had to get that penalty to score against us. I think it's been really impressive, and they just found a way. There's a ton of analysis, a ton of metrics that we always dissect in this sport, and it becomes so much of the fuel for conversations like this. But there has to be something about an attitude, and there has to be something about going up against sides like these and just finding a way. We all would have liked 3 or 4-0, but given the context, the injuries, the lack of rest, the weather out there today apparently was really, really nasty and gnarly. This is, 1-0 is beautiful for me, and I certainly am happy to take it, especially when you consider that Sheffield are a side that is due. They're going to win eventually, and it always feels like we're the kind of side that here comes Everton and ends up being the tonic that these sides need. We weren't that today. They can be someone else's victim when they eventually win their first game, but it's not going to be us today. And we go second in the league. And I think it's absolutely amazing. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's. We haven't even mentioned the goal scorer really yet. David, we sort of said that it's. The goal sort of came completely out of pattern with the rest of the match in regards to it being a nice flowing move and a really precision finish. And I think, in the sense of Sigurdsson as well, his great moments and positive moments sort of fell out of line with his performance, I think, as well, because I think I was put on Twitter there, he was really poor in open play and from set pieces. But he was quite lucky to stay on the pitch, to be honest, because Tom Davies got dragged off and was having quite a good game. Maybe could have pushed Gomez forward and taken Sigurdsson off. But, that's what Sigurdsson in an ideal world, and when you think about the best version of Gylfi Sigurdsson does, isn't it? Gets on the end of something in the box, finishes into sides of the game for you, and we want to see more from him. Obviously, he's been nowhere near it really in the last couple of years or so in an Everton share. But if you can produce moments like that 5 more times over the course of the season when the game's on a knife edge, then you might just be worth something to this football team still.
I agree with you. I agree with your comments on his performance. I don't think he was great at all. I think there's a lot of excuses why I think we can consider why it was such a poor performance from him. You've mentioned some in the conditions, also the opposition, and if it was going to be a game that you're really going to struggle to string 5, 6, 7 passes together, even keeping the ball on the floor at times looked quite difficult. So I'm willing to let him have that, given the fact that not only because he scored the winner, which was a wonderful goal, but also because he's actually been decent in the last few weeks. I think he's been a good player for us. I think he's been a positive influence on the pitch. And I actually think he looked a figure cut and a captain for once as well. I think he's shown some leadership qualities, having to stand up in the face of adversity. And I think that's a theme that I'll take from tonight, is that Rob's right, we spend a hell of a lot of time talking about the intricacies of how Everton's set up, and perhaps we don't often focus enough on the things that a game like this really shows and unveils about the side, and that is them showing a set of bollocks. That is them showing the courage to stand up. It's so easy for Everton to go there and take a 0-0 draw. I wouldn't have been massively disappointed with a 0-0 draw, given the circumstances, given how this felt as if we were set up to fall in typical Everton fashion, given their circumstances and what performances like this do very, very rarely in seasons over the years that I've suffered as an Evertonian, is they surprise you. Very rarely they do it, but they surprise you. And tonight's one of those nights. Tonight, you look at the characteristics of that performance, and it was all about being angry. It was about being gnarly. It was about, fighting fire with fire. It felt like an FA Cup tie to me at times. Such was the gulf in class, but we had to dig deep. We had to go down and fight them at their level. We were never going to win this playing the best version of Everton that could possibly be available today, given the quality that we had missing. But you look at who come on, and now we're starting to see things that me and Rob discussed earlier on this season on one of our long compods, and it was about how if we can get something from these players that have let us down time after time, this Everton side could surprise people. It could do something different. It could break the sort of equilibrium that we've known in the Premier League for quite some time, simply because we do have the quality where it's needed. And tonight, that was all about that performance. That was for the Everton rejects. That tonight, I think that was for the Everton bench warmers, the letdowns, the overly priced clowns that we've come to criticise week on week. You look at some of them who come on. Sigurdsson probably led that line. You look at Tom Davis, one of his best performances in a blue shirt for many, many a match. Yeah. You look at Bernard come on like a man possessed. Andre Gomez all of a sudden looked quick. There were all these different facets to a performance, all put on show by players who have invariably let us down more often than not. And lo and behold, you look at it and you think, wow, Everton have got a squad. Look out. Because the first 11 we don't have much of a problem with. The first 11 will put a lot of teams in this division to the sword. When we have to dig deep like we did tonight, and when I saw that lineup, it was the old, that meme with the dog that pulls the funny face. It was a little bit one of them, wasn't it? It was one of them. That's what it felt to me when I looked at that side. And then all of a sudden they surprise you. I mean, you look at how they ran the clock down towards the end there. It was masterful. It was like a vintage side that, does this week after week, winning games 1-0 after 1-0. It was all completely different to me. It wasn't a bottle job. It didn't look like it was going to be one. The defence looked solid as a rock. Michael Keane comes off. I think we need to discuss that. I actually think it was planned for him to maybe perhaps just do an hour, given the fact we have 4 centre-halves on the pitch. And Holgate moves to centre-back. is absolutely fine. Ben Godfrey, once again, superb as a left defender. I'm going to call him because I don't think he's a left back. Given how we sort of struggle to get the ball forward on those sides at times. And the manager deserves immense credit for his management there, because it looks to me, he's looked at this match thinking, do you know what, we've got this and we've got Manchester City, you've got teams on either end of the scale that we've got to play in the space of 48 hours, just over 48 hours. What's our best chance of getting the most amount of points? Taking 3 against Sheffield United is imperative, because this one against City now is a little bit different, isn't it? I'm not going to say it's a free hit, because I think that's disrespectful to the position we found ourselves in. But we can really go and attack this Manchester City game now. And hopefully his management of the squad means we've got something left in the tank to go head-to-head with them.
Yeah, the game management at the end, I think that was the maturity that we needed to see that out, was bizarrely personified by Alex Iwobi. And I don't say that to patronise him, but it's looked like a characteristic that is just beyond him since he joined Everton. Watching him keep the ball in the corner at the end and actually do some skills, which I saw creep out as well. He looks like a man possessed on that right wing. I mean, the amount of times that he just picks the ball up now and drives at fullbacks. It's bizarre to see an Everton winger do that. We're talking about going back to Andre Kanchelskis and Anders Limpar since we've seen someone just aggressively run at the opposition goal, and it looks like a real defined plan that Ancelotti has for Iwobi, in particular in the first half where he actually took on opposition players. I mean, these things all happened. It was all there on video. But I think that it's an interesting one on Gylfi Sigurdsson, because I think the interesting stat for him tonight that I saw was that he had the highest passing success rate on the pitch. And we come away from that thinking that that's a pretty poor game for him. I think that the takeaway from that is that he is in this side not to play safe ball and keep possession. He's in there for the moments that he's created. The reason that you hook someone like Tom Davies after an okay game, after 65 minutes, is that in those situations, he is largely ineffective. And that's not anything against Davies. It's just the nature of a game winner like Gylfi Sigurdsson. You want to ideally be in a position where your team is that structured that you can afford someone like Gylfi Sigurdsson to have a poor 70 minutes and still be able to persist with him. Because when that opportunity comes, there has to be an acceptance that on nights like tonight, he might put 6 or 7 really poor free kicks or through balls in. But on that one moment, which clearly we were in a game that was going to be defined by one moment of anything, and he is the man who is able to do that. It's going to take him games. He looks like he's finally starting to create some form of momentum. But when I say that, it's not always going to be in performance. We're never going to look back at a football season and think Gylfi Sigurdsson played really well for those 10 games. If I can look back at him and say, do you remember that Christmas period where he got 4 goals and assisted 3 and we won 7 out of 8 games? That's essentially why we bought a player like Gylfi Sigurdsson in the first place. So as frustrating as it is, and as much as we've never been a football team who have been able to afford one particular player that luxury, unfortunately, when people like James and when people like Richarlison are out, the flair has to come from somewhere. The affordance has to be given to one player. And I think Gylfi Sigurdsson is clearly that man at the moment.
It was the exact finish he was looking for at Burnley, wasn't it? It was almost like he was in that position.
It's probably a harder one than the Burnley one, I think.
I think it was. I think he had less time. And that's probably why he comes up with such a precise finish. Matt, I think, you look back at that Burnley one, he probably had a little bit too much time to pick his spot. You look at the precision of the footwork that goes into the move that creates that opportunity is so precise. But I'd like to sort of praise players here who we've completely either written off or didn't have a hope in hell of seeing them on an Everton pitch anytime soon. And I think Bernard personified that. I think he completely transferred this game, and he completely outshone everybody else on the pitch. And there looked to be a real point to prove as soon as he entered the fray. And this is against a physical side. He wouldn't necessarily expect them to do so. Again, similar with Gomez, who was a bit of a foil for everybody when he come on as well. Lo and behold, these lads, Gabriel Agbonlahor must be having kittens tonight. South American, someone from South America doing well on a cold winter's night in England. Notched that down as one of Richarlison's moves, Matt, as well, and one of James Rodriguez's moves in the stat pack we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. One other South American who was excellent tonight, and I want to throw this to you, Rob, because we haven't really done the big Yerry Mina chat on any of our post-match shows, because while he's been playing well, other people have perhaps played a little bit better. We focused a lot on the full-backs, obviously, in Holgate and Godfrey playing out of position, Keane playing every minute of the season, etc., etc. But I thought Mina had a great game again tonight as well. I think the Manchester United game, he made a couple of really important blocks that got a bit overlooked because we didn't win the game. And at the end tonight, actually, as well, he did an excellent job, didn't he? Just heading everything away, kicking everything away. And I think what's actually really important for Mina as well is that he's actually playing a lot of games and getting minutes, something we've not really expected him to be able to do.
Yeah, look, I've been a big believer for a while in Yerry Mina's talent, but I've fully conceded that what he has had to prove to a lot of people is that he can be durable and reliable, and can go longer stretches without and avoid the individual mistakes. Defenders, if you play enough minutes in this league, you're going to make a mistake. A goal is going to get scored on you. There are very few that have just, who are flawless and perfect. But, how many of the players that you truly love and have affection for are perfect, flawless players? Yerry Mina is not that. But at the same time, I think he's been fantastic lately. And I think he has really proven a lot of his doubters wrong from the standpoint of just being able to stay on the pitch, to contribute meaningfully to games where we've been really good defensively, getting a goal, obviously against Arsenal that was wonderful. And I'd also point out too that when we talk about, I think what sometimes drives me a little crazy is that he's starting all these games where we're getting clean sheets, we're not allowing shots in the second half, etc. And that's certainly not down to one person, but he's been a really big key part of that. And I think that he is certainly owed his due at this point, in terms of how he's played. This is what we thought we were paying for, and we're starting to get it. Obviously, I think that a lot of people thought that he was just sort of warming the seat for Mason Holgate to take that spot. But I give Michael Keane and Yerry Mina as a partnership, which is something that we talk about a lot, that center halves really have to sometimes be judged as units as opposed to individual players. I have to give that pairing a huge amount of credit. Let's be honest, most of you who are listening to this right now have probably, and even I probably have to a degree, kind of bought into the narrative that, well, they can't play together. And yet they have played together. They've been playing together for the vast majority of not only this season, but the vast majority of the games where we've won. and I think at a certain point, you can't just continue to say it's a fluke or it's just this kind of, lucky situation that they somehow are just holding on for dear life. They've been really good as a partnership. Now, I still don't want. I think that we get into this thing where we feel like we have to speculate about, well, what does the long-term partnership look like? When is it Holgate? When is it Godfrey? When does Branthwaite get involved? I don't really care about those things right now. I'm not really concerned about that right now. All we really need to worry about is, how is this group of players playing at the moment? Are they contributing meaningfully to us playing well? They are, and I think that getting too far down the road is certainly, problematic. The only other thing I'll say too is that Dave made a really good point about how not only this game was sort of a microcosm of the kind of island of misfit children who found a way to, get us a win. I think that if you look at the broader narrative of this season, guys like Alex Iwobi, guys like Yerry Mina, you could even begin to argue that Tom Davis is starting to inch his way into this conversation of being a productive, solid, reliable squad player. These are all players that we had given up on for, I mean, I don't know if I never really gave up on Yerry Mina, but I think a lot of people have given up on some of these players as being completely useless parts. And we talked about this notion that we can't continue to rely on external solutions, that if we've got the elite manager that we think we do, then he has got to find a way to make the players and the talent that he's got in this squad better. And that's what Carlo Ancelotti has done. And the proof is in the table, and you're seeing it. Despite the fact that we had all of these players out, finding ways to be exactly where we are, to go on this run without all of those players, I think it's a huge testament to Carlo Ancelotti. And I'm made up for these players, because you can tell those who have kind of redeemed themselves are really enjoying that part of this journey.
I just wanted to continue that point, Rob. I think it's an excellent way of looking at things now. When we consider Tom Davies, when we consider Gomez, who's sadly fallen into that category of a player that we feel may well be surplus to requirements, I'm starting to look at them in a different way, and I think that's what the manager's done. A lot of our problems, I think, stem from overcomplicating things as a football club with certain views on certain players. And as fans, I think we're really guilty of doing this. For instance, when we have a player that's out, i.e. Richarlison, I think the go-to thought for many Evertonians is we need somebody to replace him, but not just replace him in terms of, yes, he's out injured, so we need somebody else in that position. We do that, I think, either subconsciously or many of us consciously, thinking that the person that has to come in has to be a replacement for exactly the same thing that Richarlison offers this side. And football doesn't work like that, because you've got a squad of 20-odd individuals there, all of whom have different attributes, whether you think they're any good or not. There's things that Anthony Gordon's good at that Richarlison's not. There's things that Tom Davies is good at that Alan is not. Yeah. That list might get less and less significant depending on how you rate the player. But if you're a good football manager, you put the player in, yes, because you have to, but secondly, you put them in with an eye on what can they offer this side, rather than what am I missing that I need them to fill the gaps with. And I think he's starting to look at these squad players, Alex Iwobi being the predominant one for me, who he sees as somebody who has a completely different skill set to James Rodriguez, and one that can still be as effective if it's allowed to flourish. And that's what I see when I see him putting people in different places. Now we may question, why has he put Anthony Gordon in? Or why is Bernard getting a go now all of a sudden when you've got other players on the bench? Well, they're getting a go because he feels as if they've got the skill set required to perform the task that he wants them to do in this side that can ultimately benefit the side and hopefully get us 3 points. He's not doing it because, well, who's the best fit for Alan not being in there? That isn't a question that we need answering. We need the answer we need is what player is most likely going to help us get 3 points. And I think, once again, it's in its simplification. However, it's starting to benefit from a manager who appears to me to strip everything back, have a look at what we have available, not what we're missing, and approaching it with a proactive attitude.
I think in terms of overcomplicating it, ironically, as much as it's worked in the last few weeks, I think Ancelotti's been the one who's, I would say, quite guilty of overcomplicating it.
Before the 4 wins, Mark, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In terms of different starting lineup every week, the mess that was summarised by that away performance at Newcastle, where we changed formation without exaggerating 4 or 5 times in the game, asking players to do jobs that, as you say, we're shoehorning people into positions in order to fulfil a setup that we think we should have, as opposed to just playing to the strengths that this squad does. It should come as a surprise to absolutely nobody that Everton have started to string results together with a relatively stable formation and setup, and in particular a pretty stable back four. And I think that sort of continuity, as much as Ancelotti has always been one to advocate the fact that there are times where a certain system will work against a certain team, and if the opposition demands a very specific approach, then we will definitely abandon all of our principles to adopt that if we feel like it'll work. But this is something that's just going to come with time. I mean, we've seen a first season where Everton play 2 right backs with Jabril Sidibe and Seamus Coleman, and we kind of just see what happens there. And then Abdoulaye Doucouré fills in there. And it's all felt up until this point very much experimental. I don't know about you guys. I'm ready for that to evolve now. I'm ready for Ancelotti to kind of stop experimenting. And as much as he needs to continue to learn, I feel like there has to be a little bit more of a refined approach about how we do that. Just to rewind massively on Yerry Mina, I think he is very much someone who tactically really benefits from having a centre back either side of him. And I'm not advocating a 5 or a 3 or whatever you want to call it at the back, but in terms of having someone like Godfrey or Holgate at right back and playing that slightly more reserved role at fullback, I think it means that Yerry Mina is isolated a hell of a lot less. If you think about Yerry Mina in trouble on a football pitch, it's generally when he's one-on-one against a striker trying to turn him because our fullback's on the halfway line after an attack.
Newcastle away, mate, won it. Yeah,
exactly. The second goal, that's exactly where Yerry Mina looks like he's running through treacle. And the more that he can be part of a setup and a 4 at the back, I think he will absolutely benefit. If you're Sheffield United and you want to pump balls into our box in the last 10 minutes, then Yerry Mina is our man all day long because that is bread and butter for him. And lastly, and more importantly on Mina, I think so much has been overlooked tactically and from a footballing perspective about him, primarily based on personality. And if we're to touch on personality for him, I think certainly after the final whistle tonight, in that brief glimpse that we saw of the players coming off, he really looks to me like an important man at this football club. Regardless of the specific role that he may have on the pitch, everything that is good and collective about the attitude of this team and the togetherness of it, he is very much central to it. And it's a massive testament to someone who has obviously not been in the country a great deal of time. He's not necessarily been in a consistent run in the side for a great deal of the time, but he looks like a really important club man. And I think you can very quickly underestimate how important that can be to have on at any area of the pitch, but in particular at centre half. He may well never ever carry an armband playing for Everton, but his mindset and his mentality is to lead. And I think we've spoken so many times about a lack of players that are capable of doing that, but his willingness to just be in charge of every situation, albeit recklessly sometimes, is something that Everton have craved for so long.
I think you can see tears in Rob's eyes there.
Yeah. No, well, actually, I do want to piggyback on something Mark said there that I think is critically important. As a group or as a subculture on Twitter or whatever we want to call ourselves as Evertonians, especially as we debate these issues of cults online, I think we get really focused in on the narrow way of looking at concepts like leadership, because what we do is we say this team needs a captain. No, what this club needs is a bunch of guys who are willing to be accountable, who are willing to be positive, who are willing to keep guys together instead of looking for reasons to become wedge type players. I mean, we're seeing these issues crop up at other clubs where you hear constantly about a bad attitude, a player who's putting himself before others. Regardless of how you feel about who should have the armband on any given day, I don't really care. I think that the concept of a captain is more romantic than it is significant on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. If Seamus Coleman is our captain or he's the club captain, that's wonderful. But he or Jagielka or whoever has come before them, I mean, it hasn't made a ton of difference because one guy, and that's not so much a shot at them, but one guy is not enough. You have to have players across the board who are willing to stand up at times, who are willing to brush off a mistake, who are willing to, not allow, something that has happened before to dictate their attitude moving forward. And that's probably been one of the things that I've felt so strongly about when it comes to Yerry Mina. To Mark's point, is that this is a guy who, regardless of whether he makes a mistake here or there, regardless of how you feel about him as a player, the one thing you can't say about Yerry Mina is that there is a lack of effort. You can't say that there is a poor attitude there. That is a guy that gives everything he's got, whether, it come hell or high water. And I think that the levity he brings to what can be a very a sport that at times is very much of a grind, especially in December when it is cold and you're tired and it's brutal. You need guys there that can put a smile on the faces of others. You need guys there who can lead not only by example, but who can, put a shout in, etc. I think in some ways, from a personality standpoint, he and Keane are perfect complements for one another, because I don't think Keane is a real vocal guy, but he is obviously leading this season by example, by playing every minute, by being really quality when he gets on there. And so Everton have to have more guys like that. And again, this all goes back to Carlo Ancelotti for me. He's taken guys that maybe have not found the room to stand up and be maybe the kinds of leaders that we all have wanted. And he has found a way to develop that culture and that accountability. And you're seeing leadership spread throughout the squad, which is really what you need more than any one individual captain. And again, I think that was typified today by the performances of guys who I've been skeptical about. Like Tom Davis was great today, guys. I mean, Tom Davis, Abdullah Decore, guys who, regardless of whether or not they shout a bunch or make a lot of noise, they led today by stepping up in a game where they needed to be good, where they needed to put in a full effort. That's what you need. You're seeing it throughout the team right now. And that's, to me, the biggest difference, is that you can't argue we haven't had some talented players or talented squads even, but what we have now is a group that is pulling together all at once. And to me, that is the biggest difference. That's why we are now second in the league as we head into the end of the year. It's amazing.
Exciting. It's exciting. We got a lot of Reds in the comments on YouTube tonight, and fair play, lads. I could understand. Dave is made up with that. And to be fair, I'll be checking on our nearest title rivals as well. To be fair, we were the defending champions, so fair play, lads. Good way to spend Boxing Day evening. Absolutely, listen to form, delighted Blues. Talk about the top. He's closing that gap on you to 2 points.
Is it? I think is it a YouTube thing, Matt, that they all sort of come on here, because they obviously we wouldn't know on the pods, would we? Because they can listen to them anonymously.
Yeah, I think a lot of them listen to us on the sly. Yeah.
I'm welcoming them into the discussion as long as you keep it clean.
We like rating. We like ratings no matter who's listening, right? That's fine by me.
Tier 2 table toppers, aren't we?
Mate, hands across Stanley Park, both top of the table. But fair play, lads. Yeah, nice one for checking in on us. Best of luck against West Brom tomorrow. But we'll leave it there from our point of view. Everton playing less than 48 hours time again, as the lads mentioned there, against Manchester City. Mad one. We'll have to see what happens, and that could be all sorts of fun and games. But these lads and this manager have certainly given us reason to believe.
Hey Matt, can I say one last thing before we close out? How good is this December compared to all the crap Decembers that we've endured for the last several years? This has been great. As much as we're sitting here having a very thoughtful discussion, I don't want the enthusiasm and the excitement to be tamped down. Yes, we're second, and that's the most important thing. But we're playing so well that we can actually say, hey, I know that Dave doesn't want to call it a free hit, and I don't want to call it that either, but it sort of is, isn't it? Because now we've done the work. We've gotten all of these wins. We've lined them up, and we've moved up the table to where, now the pressure isn't on us to rescue ourselves in these really, really tough calendar crunch games. So I think it's great.
Yeah. When's the last time we won on a Boxing Day?
Last year.
Yeah, we do all right on Boxing Day.
I may or may not have had a drink tonight.
Well, mate. Just about finished whiskey, so we'll leave it there anyway. Hope everybody has a good rest of the Boxing Day. Rob, you've got the whole day ahead over there.
Yeah, well, it's a lovely day here in Texas, visiting family with our masks on and our distancing. But I think we're going to go for a walk or something like that and eat some good Tex-Mex food tonight. So I'm excited.
Rob, excuse my ignorance. It's not called Boxing Day in America, is it?
It's catching on here. I think people refer to it as Boxing Day a little bit, but I don't know if it's as It's certainly not as much of a cultural touchstone as it is there to call it Boxing Day. But it's Boxing Day in my heart. That's all that matters.
Absolutely. But it's been a pleasure sharing it with you. Thanks very much to everyone on YouTube as well, even the Reds for getting involved.
All the best, Reds.
Yeah, it's this time of year, so we'll be festive and nice to you. But of course, we'll be back again after that Manchester City game. In the meantime, on Blue Room Extra, I'll be speaking to Dave Mooney from the Blue Moon podcast and the chat about how City are facing up in that one. Our Blue Room Breakfast in the morning as well. So 2 shows going out on Blue Room Extra over on Patreon if you want a little bit more from us.